Welcome to Stuff They Didn't Teach Me in Sunday School. One of my favorite little quotes is that all people bring joy. Some people bring joy when they arrive, others bring joy when they leave. Paul's letter to the Christians of Philippi is a letter of joy. If you had to pick one church out that Paul seems to be the most fond of and gives him the most joy, I think you'd have to pick out Paul's letter to Philippians. This is a church that's near and dear to him. Paul had been imprisoned in Philippi. You might remember the story of the jailer at Philippi. Paul's in prison. Paul and Silas, they're singing hymns. The earthquake comes. All the prisoners stay in there. The jailer's about to kill himself. And Paul says, you don't need to do that. And the guy says, tell me what I have to do to be saved. And Paul then responds with the gospel message for this jailer. When Paul writes the letter to Philippians, he's in jail again. Chapter 1 verse 13 says, so that it has become known throughout the whole Praetorian Guard and to all the rest that my imprisonment is for Christ. He's in jail, and he says now the whole Praetorian Guard, which would imply he's in Rome, knows that his imprisonment is for Jesus Christ. And then at the very end of the book, chapter 4 verse 22, he says, all the saints greet you, especially those of Caesar's household. You got to believe, and you got to be able to see here, that Paul has had an impact on the lives of people, even in his imprisonment in Rome. Probably his guards, those who came in contact with him, have come to faith in Jesus Christ. One of the most beautiful sections of Paul's epistle to the Philippians is toward the end of chapter 1, at verse 19. He says, yes, and I shall rejoice. The word rejoice just comes up again and again in this epistle. For I know that through your prayers and the help of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, this will turn out for my deliverance, his imprisonment he's talking about. As it is my eager expectation and hope that I shall not be at all ashamed, but with full courage now, as always, Christ will be honored in my body, whether by life or death. Line I love. For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain. I worked with a pastor for about 6 years back in the 70s. Became a near and dear friend. He's now with the Lord. I don't think he would mind me mentioning his name, Pastor Al Thiem. And Al would often have a sermon at a funeral that he's used this verse to spring from. He would talk about the life that person lived and how God was at work in their lives. But he would always come back to this verse, for me, to me, live is Christ, to die is gain. And he said, another way to put that is to live is Christ, to die is more Christ. So to live is a good thing because you're with Jesus. To die is an even better thing because you're even more with Jesus. Now try that with anything else that people live for. For me, to live is money. To die is more money? Doesn't work. For me, to live is a big house. To die is a bigger house? Well, I suppose if you understand the mansions that God's creating for you, maybe so, but generally speaking, apart from faith, that certainly doesn't work. For me, to live is power and authority. For me, to die is more power and authority. It doesn't work. Only works with Jesus in that equation. For me, to live is Christ. To die is more Christ. To die is gain. Paul wasn't going to get that choice as to whether he was going to live or die, but he recognized that in death, that actually was gain for him. And yet he also recognized in this section that God just might have some more work for him to do here on this earth. The letter to the Christians at Philippi is one, as I said, full of joy. Verse 4 of chapter 4, Paul says, rejoice in the Lord always. Again I will say, rejoice. Chapter 4, verse 8, finally, brethren, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there's any excellence, if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. And then he ends the book with some personal thanks to the folks there, some personal greetings to the people there. And you know by the time you've read the book of Philippians, the epistle of Philippians, that you've read somebody else's mail, and you've read somebody else's pretty intimate mail. Paul loved this congregation, loved this church, and that love for them, and that joy in what they become comes through loud and clear in Paul's letter to Philippians.